For Whom the Bell Tolls is a 1959 TV play. It's actually released, or was released, in 2 parts, but I watched it as one feature-length film, as it were. Although, having said that, the 2 parts were pretty much feature-length anyway. And I watched this because Nicholas Colasanto is in it. And I didn't like it. But it's very highly rated on IMDb. Granted, there are only 20-something reviews and ratings, so not a huge pool of opinions, but I will share my thoughts. But ultimately, I didn't enjoy this experience, and I don't think it worked very well. This was directed by John Frankenheimer. It's written by A. Hotchner, and of course based on the novel by Hemingway. I haven't read the novel, so of course I can't comment on how it compares. If anybody watches this and has any thoughts on that, please feel free to share. It doesn't make me want to watch the novel, but that being said, it's not necessarily my kind of story anyway, so I'm willing for a tiny part to say that I disliked it down to personal preference, but there were various things about this that didn't work. It's about the Spanish Civil War, and this individual, Jordan, is tasked with blowing these bridges up, or this particular bridge, and it's about the process to that and various other characters involved in this, and we meet various other individuals. And honestly, there are a few reasons why I didn't like this. The first is that it's very, very long. Obviously, as I said, it was released in 2 parts, but even then, I don't think we needed 3 hours to tell the story, the best part of 3 hours. Again, I haven't read the novel. Maybe a lot was left out, and actually this is a rather shortened version. I have no idea. But for me, I found it to be far too long. Nothing happens for a tremendous chunk of time. A lot of it is just about the relationship between the characters and the dialogue. Sometimes the dialogue was okay, but not enough to carry the narrative or to carry the film or the 2 parts for the entire duration. I also found some of the acting to be very wooden and not very pleasing to watch. Not all of it. Not all the time for the same actors either. I do think there was one scene in particular. It's a very, very slow film, but eventually, towards the end, the action does pick up a little bit and things get, well, I'm going to say they get action-packed, but everybody's movements are so slow. The narrative seems like it should be very quick and very anxiety-inducing as people are getting injured and things are getting chaotic, and everybody's just moving so slowly as if there's no rush and no panic. And people are, not everybody and not all of the time, but it's just very unrealistic and unbelievable. And that definitely felt like, okay, maybe I'm going to sit through this tremendously long narrative, but it'll end up giving us this powerful final act and everything will be really action-packed and everything will kind of come together, and it was just tremendously slow, and the movements of the characters were slow, and it felt really amateur. And I don't like saying that, but it really, really did. So the narrative for me didn't appeal, but I also think it's tremendously slow, and not a lot happens. They absolutely could have told this story in half of the time without losing anything from the film. Again, I don't know about the novel itself, but certainly what was presented in this TV play, we could have taken out a lot without losing anything. Yes, occasionally some of the characters were interesting, occasionally some of the performances were pretty decent, but at the same time, some of the performances were very, very poor and very unrealistic and just not pleasant to watch. So for me, For Whom the Bell Tolls was not an enjoyable experience, partly because of the length and the slowness, but it just didn't feel like a quality production either. And as I said, it's got 7-point-something out of 10 on IMDb, but only across 20-something reviews and ratings. So I guess if you're a fan of the story, I'd say check it out. For me, this is not a good introduction to For Whom the Bell Tolls. As I said, it's not necessarily my kind of story. I probably never would have looked into the novel anyway. But if you're curious about the story, I'd say don't start with this. Maybe if I'd read the novel, it might have been a more interesting experience, because then I could say, okay, is this character behaving in the way that I imagined? Does this set design look the way I imagined when I was reading the book? That would have been a bit more interesting, but still not enough to save it. So for me, I didn't think For Whom the Bell Tolls was particularly good. I didn't exactly enjoy the experience. I'm not going to read the novel, at least not anytime soon. If you've read the book, yeah, maybe it's worth checking out. But certainly from my perspective, I'd say don't make this your first experience of For Whom the Bell Tolls, because all things considered, it's not very good.